the Bulldogs season back on track. 11-point narrow winners over the Swans at Marvel last night. It was close. A protected zone 50 put the margin to within just 5 points with a minute to go, but the Bulldogs hung on, courtesy of Marcus Montempelli. The big talking points for mine, of course, the fact that the Bulldogs season, at least for the moment, is back on track. A lot better being 1-2 than 0-3. It's a huge, huge difference. Dunkley, arguably his best game for the club last night. Dele Smith returning in style from his hip complaint with 31 touches. Some injury concerns for the Dogs. Marcus Montempelli will presumably, and I spoke to Bevo obviously about this post-match in the press conference, get his shoulder checked out just as a matter of precaution either today or tomorrow. Ace Cordy suffering a concussion. But it was a good night. He'll go into protocols. It was a good night for the Bulldogs. Just from the Swans' perspective, that had 2 6-day breaks. John Longmuir wasn't making any excuses post-game, acknowledging that the Bulldogs were a bit harder at the contest and I think cleaner, particularly through the middle of the ground. But some of the typical Sydney stats we see, they were -9 on clearances, -24 on contested possessions, -16 on tackles. Some of that grunt work was missing last night. They couldn't quite replicate it. Perhaps they were tired off the back of 2 6-day breaks and take nothing away from the Bulldogs. One that's floating below the radar that I want to put on the agenda today is some frustration still on the part of the coaches that they haven't caught up with their pay since the COVID adjustments this year. The crux of the issue is that the executives at the clubs have basically got their pay back to pre-COVID levels. So as the AFL executive, the coaches, who are key stakeholders of the game, are still sitting on cuts of 20 and 30%. And some prominent ones, I think, including Longmuir. I think Chris Scott's been discussing this behind the scenes, and also Luke Beveridge. A couple of the prominent coaches, 2 or 3 of them, are really trying now to remedy this situation with the AFL. It's not all about those guys just getting their money back. They're not trying to line their pockets, so they want obviously some of that money back for the coaching department. But what's happening at the moment is that obviously the good coaches, the experienced ones who are on the bigger money, because that money goes with the reduced soft cap, they're being penalised, particularly the ones up around 8, 9, 100,000 or $1 million a year. That's really penalising the clubs, and they're being penalised, I guess, in terms of getting paid less, and also that taking out more of the football cap. What's Gill doing to solve it? I still think Gill's supportive of including half or up to half of the senior coaches' salary outside the soft cap. That was met with resistance from some of the clubs recently, but there's certainly a view at the moment from West Coast and Collingwood and Sydney that the AFL should increase that soft cap. I think more and more clubs over the coming weeks will echo that position. Perhaps the Bombers and Carlton will hopefully hear perhaps from Luke Sayers and also Paul Brasher on that in the next couple of weeks. I can't speak for them, but I think you'll find there's some more support to modestly increase the soft cap. Andrew Pridham, the Swans chairman, talked about $500,000 or so this week. There's also a view that if you excluded half the senior coach's wage from the soft cap, you wouldn't necessarily be even penalising the smaller clubs. If they want to go for less experienced coaches, it'll just free up more money in other areas of the soft cap. So I think there'll be a big discussion, or there's certainly a growing discussion and some growing frustration on the part of some of the senior coaches at the moment that their coaching departments and them are still sitting on some pretty big pay cuts, 20 and 30%, when the executives and at the club level and the AFL have both bounced back. Selection Thursday, always interesting. Devon Smith dropped from the Bombers. Tom Phillips dropped from Hawthorn. Still no Liam Shields in Hawthorn's side. Obviously tough to find a spot at the moment. Mitch McGovern again injured with some hamstring concerns at Carlton, which always worries me given his persistent recent history of back and hamstring issues, although he has most recently been reasonably fit. So that's a concern for Mitch McGovern. But just on Devon Smith, he's definitely at the crossroads of the Bombers. He's got a year to run on that contract. The knock, obviously, from a selection perspective, why he's been dropped is I think he's had 2 tackles now in 2 games this year. His job as a pressure forward to apply those tackles, had just the 4 disposals against Brisbane. I do think the Bombers have broader concerns with Smith in terms of just the way he approaches it. Hopefully this is the wake-up call that he needs to get dropped, and he'll come back and get himself back into form. But he's got a year to run on that contract. I do think at the end of the year there's a chance, it's very, very early, the Bombers would look at trading him. But look, that's a long way off. There's a lot of football and water to pass under the bridge before then. I'm not sure anyone would take him. So it's in Essendon's best interests and Smith's best interests for him to try and play himself back into form. He won't be able to do that this weekend because he's been dropped. The bad news for the Dockers yesterday, Justin Longmuir, their highly rated coach, unfortunately won't be able to coach this weekend. He's under COVID protocols. That's a bit of a blow for the Dockers. In terms of this weekend, I can't wait because the Bombers, Port Adelaide and the Giants are all trying to avoid going 0-3. And of course, there's subplots and stories in all that. I know there's varying expectations concerning the Bombers, but 0-3 would not be a good start. Having said that, they only beat one team in the top 8 last year, so they have come up against some good opposition. That will continue tonight with, of course, Melbourne. Doesn't get any easier for the Bombers. A rare Friday night doubleheader tonight. Port Adelaide, there'll be a lot of focus on Ken Hinkley again and just the setup and what's going on over there. I know they've got injuries if they go 0-3. Likewise on Leon Cameron at the Giants, so that the Giants have got the Suns. So they should be able to, in inverted commas, or underline, whatever you like, be able to get the job done there. But don't miss Triple M football all throughout the weekend. It's been a big news week. Thanks for joining us again on the podcast today. Don't miss us again on Monday, and make sure you tune in over the weekend because Triple M rocks football.